Can everybody see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, great. And apologies. We'll try to get these out on Tuesday afternoon rather than Wednesday, just to give a little bit more of a lead time. But as you all know, other full-time jobs and things like that. But all the documents are in this. And, you know, in terms of the Google Docs, everybody has access to that now. And then the videos for the last couple meetings. So those could be helpful just to play catch up. And just to save on some time, I think everybody's done that. But if you can provide in your, including myself, what your affiliation is and your name, or just drop it in the chat, that will be helpful for others just to take a look at. So so I'll do that myself. It'll take a minute to do that. So otherwise, I know that Joe Casey has joined us and John Marion, our two co-chairs. This agenda, again, is just again, I am letting everybody in, so my apologies to everybody. But if we can just begin, go right into this in terms of the proposed boundaries. And Rob, I'm going to stop sharing. And if you can begin with sharing the maps.
All right, there's two maps that I'm going to share. The first is kind of, these are the proposed boundaries. And let's see if I have, I don't have any augmentation tools, so apologies for that. So here is City Hall. This is Vicente's. For those of you who know, police station, YMCA, and the library. Seniors are just outside. So we're looking at an area that starts on Haverhill at the north and stretches down all to the river on the south, and pretty much Warren Avenue to Commercial. For collecting.
Rob, can I stop you for 1 second? Can everybody see that map fine? Does he need to enlarge it at all? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
For the purposes of collecting signatures on the petition, we have tried to make it easier and are running the boundaries for the most part down roadways. You'll see, you know, Warren Avenue here or Central Street here. Services would probably extend to both sides of the street. You know, if we were to have a clean green team, we wouldn't just sweep one side of the street. We would do it both. But so we need to figure out, do we include the properties across the street or not? And is this too big of an area or not? And to better understand, John, I'm letting in the area, I am going to then stop sharing this one and share another map, which breaks this down by land use. And here you'll see, again, City Hall here in blue. All the blue properties are tax exempt. The yellow properties are residential in nature. Green, are mixed use. The commercial are red, and there's a couple of industrial properties which are purple. So again, here's Vicente's, here's City Hall, here's the YMCA, Harbor One Bank. So you get an idea of how the property lays out. Anne is going to tell you a little bit more that, you know, the mass majority of the district needs to be commercial / industrial or mixed use. I think that this area does cover that. But as we go forward, we'll want to discuss boundary size and participation. So I see Chris has his hand up. Chris,
wait, I can ask now or I can wait, whatever you want to do.
let's ask now.
Okay. So, I mean, I had a chance to look at this last night and it looks great. I think it naturally flows. Except that I would ask a couple questions about Jimmy's Donuts in particular, because it does face Pleasant Street and it's just really recently renovated and faces that development of Vicentes. I would think that would be included, but that's
And
up
that's
in the
the
left.
area right here.
Yep, that one lot right there, because it is a drive-through. It's a donut. It was the former donut shop. Now it's a restaurant that's
Boston
being
chicken.
renovated.
Right.
I think that makes sense, Chris.
Yeah. Okay. And then as they come up, Warren, I think it's important to include the public safety building, the new public safety building, because it's part of the downtown, it's part of the community. In fact, they're going to be providing services in the bid district. And even though it's not taxable, I think it sends the right message that it's part of and not separate from.
Good point, Chris.
It's at the top of
Yeah, right here.
Frederick Douglass Way. Yep. Right
There
there.
is a large missing segment here, which is cottage,
Mostly residential, right?
mostly residential. And then this down here, which is kind of behind the YMCA, that's mostly residential, but we would want to include, Warren, this is the Corcoran building.
Yep.
The Corcoran parking lot. This is commercially owned property, which will be redeveloped probably soon. This other side of the street probably won't be developed anytime soon. They're residential. My thought is that they not be included in the signature campaign, but
Yep.
would, have sweeping in the, if we were to do street sweeping.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. Moving to the east border, the natural flow when you drive around the downtown is to extend that a little bit to the right onto Plymouth Street. Even though, again, there's a lot of public housing, there's a school, there's the Bat Center. That's part of the community of downtown, and it's a natural flow when you're driving. You're trying to circumnavigate the downtown. That's kind of the furthermost eastern street you'll take and still be included kind of in the new housing development. And you got D'Angelo's in there. You've got Catholic Charities. You've got a plumbing service company. You've got Bat, but you're pointing to right now.
This is the Bat Center I'm pointing
Yep.
at right now.
Yep.
This is the
So
post office.
So I would think that we would just bump that out one set of, you can see those yeah, exactly. Because it runs along the river, and that's kind of a natural delineation between the commercial, and then everything to the right seems to be either the school system, the pool, or the public pool, the cemetery, and a large residential district.
Okay. If you all agree with Chris, would you write yes in the chat? If you disagree with Chris, disconnect him.
It's just an observation, and I won't be offended if people don't think. It's mostly public land, so you're not going to get a lot of tax dollars, but it is part of the downtown.
Right.
And there are a couple, like D'Angelo's, he makes a lot of his bread there and that type of thing. I mean,
over here, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cindy had her hand raised, but then she lowered it. I don't know if you had a question, Cindy.
I was just going to say exactly the same thing that Chris said. Wherever there's that boundary, if there's businesses on that, other side, we've got to include them. And I love how he pointed out Jimmy's Donuts. It's a perfect example. So
Okay.
wherever we have that little border, we've got to include the fringe businesses. Absolutely.
Mr. Casey, you are on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you, Chris. Very thoughtful. My basic question, knowing nothing about bids and experiences where it's been successful in the past, is my first impression is this is a very large geographical area. And have there been successful bids this large in the Commonwealth is my basic question, because is it too large of an area to support whatever services that we're going to come up with? I mean, it's a pretty large area. It's a basic question I have.
It's not extraordinarily large. If it makes sense that this is how what feels like your core area of your downtown, your district, you want to be big enough so you have impact and you're pulling in the major destination drivers, the major commercial districts, as well as other attractions. Like you've got a courthouse there, you've got reasons where people are coming to your downtown. I don't think it's that big. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of parcels, but it's not. I think Springfield's district is probably 25 blocks. I don't know. I don't think it's that extraordinarily large.
Thank you.
Who else had Mike Lambert? Maybe no. Anyway, there was a comment that Mike Lambert had put in the chat that maybe we could, where is it? Sorry. Would we need a smaller area for a Green Team Ambassador program? Basically,
And then my comment back was that I would think everybody who's paying into the bid would want the same level of services. That's just, fair is fair if I'm paying into it.
Right.
Just a thought.
So to go back to Ann, and this is just a question based on services and coverage. And is there specifically security teams that are allocated on some of these bids? I mean, is that one of the services that any of them are?
Yeah, well, some of them certainly have ambassador programs. Some of the larger ones, like Springfield, has a clean team and a clean team program primarily. Worcester has an ambassador program. Crossing and Newmarket all have pretty significant security, clean and safe programs going on, and actual job creation programs for people to work on job training programs. All of those larger bids have those components, but I think that depends on what you're ultimately what you plan to identify as your supplemental programs and services that you want to offer. That's going to help inform you on how, sort of where some of these boundaries might drop off.
Well, I'm asking based upon, I think the size is a little aggressive in a way, but I think a green or a security team is one of the things I'd be lobbying for. And I want to make sure that we're not overzealous in what we could cover based upon.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at, you've got a fair amount of there's a bit of a as Robert asked the question, is there a correlation between size and budget? And I think, well, of course there is, particularly if you have, some of these more labor intensive types of services that you want to offer. But I think that just because something is not tax paying doesn't mean that they aren't necessarily participating in the bid financially to support it. So for example, the federal government owned buildings like a post office does participate in bids through they're in a good neighbor policy, and they do that through a contract. So in like the state, and most of the times those are contracted services that you work out as part of your fee structure. So it's really taking a look at, who you have in this district. Other nonprofits are dealt with in different ways. Some bids do negotiated agreements, other bids write them right into the fee formula like Worcester does. So it really depends on, that's why it's important to understand, who's in your bid, and what are if you have a number of nonprofits or government uses, how do those properties come into your bid in your fee structure or not? You could exempt some of these if you want to.
Cindy asked a question in the chat: who currently takes care of the Main Street planters, gardens, and would this program offer a service and needs to coordinate with that group? Rob, it is not just God who's doing that, but it is the Brockton Garden Club.
Well, I said the Brockton Garden Club.
I know, I saw that. It was
God waters the Brockton Club
Yes,
plant.
he does. But I think that I know, just because Rob and myself both have connections to them, that they would probably like to continue to have engagement. And I think they should. They've been holding fort in terms of many of the,
Wonderful partners.
exactly.
You know, a lot of those, that's a great opportunity that, you know, bids, a lot of times what they do is try to leverage those other community partnerships and relationships that you have. And maybe God doesn't do a great job of watering all the time. So maybe the bid can help supplement that, because nothing is more depressing than seeing a dry August and everything dies in your planters because there's no consistent.
If I
way
could just
to
offer, if this program is going to extend green space or, more of Main Street or whatever, that would impact their work. So I think that is something to consider. When do we say, hey, Garden Club, guess what? You got more work on your plate? Or do we include some supplemental help? I don't know. So that was my.
I think these are good questions to bank for the time being, because I don't think we need to make that decision now, but these are good conversations to put on the plate when we get to that point, Cindy.
Rick has his hand up right now.
Yes, he does.
I just want to comment with regard to size and budget. Revenues, I'm on the board of the Boston bid, and we get revenues not only from property owners, but rather also tenants, large tenants that have a vested interest on the value of the streetscape. Like Rockland Trust, we're not an owner, we're a tenant, both in our office building as well as in our retail space on Franklin Street here in Boston. So we have a vested interest as well. So I think you have to understand that it shouldn't only be property owners, but rather to include those long-term residents, so to speak, whether they're commercial or residential. That's all.
And just for keeping score at the moment with the current boundaries that we have here, there's 428 parcels, and their total assessed value is a little over $278 million.
Rob, you and John put together that little chart that might be helpful to show. But in the meantime, Joe Casey asked, what is the impact of having such a large tax exempt component? Do they historically participate and pay into annual budget?
The answer to that question is it depends on the nonprofit, and it depends on your fee structure. But yes, in most cases they participate in some way. So the municipality typically participates, as do state and federal properties, and they participate in one structure. And then frequently the other nonprofits have either they're part of the fee structure, like in Worcester, or they a lot of times are part of a negotiated agreement, an MOU of some sort, and that could include cash or in-kind services.
And are those voluntary agreements?
No, you would write it into your fee structure. So for example, if you said in your fee structure, the way we're going to deal with nonprofits is we will have a negotiated agreement. Now, each one of those negotiated agreements may look a little different because they would be identified as part of your fee structure. Or you could say, like they did in Worcester, they had a number of big nonprofits who said, we want to be part of the regular fee structure. So they just were written in with the same calculation as a regular commercial property. So the Hanover Theater, the Y, a number of large nonprofits that were in downtown Worcester. Those are two different ways of approaching it. And that's something you'll work out as you start thinking about what your fee structure looks like.
Okay, well, that was great conversation on bid boundary. We'll have more of that as we progress. But right now, Mary is going to talk about community engagement and education.
Thanks, Rob. I just want, before we do move on, to anybody else, just questions. I know there's been a lot going on just about the boundaries. You all will have that link to look, as Chris said, he looked at it last night. It will be important to keep looking at those boundaries and having the discussion. Who is raising their hand? Sorry. Oh, Robert Jenkins.
Yep. Am I muted? Am I on? Can
You
hear
are
me?
on.
We can hear you, Robert.
One of the things, and especially for our downtown in this large area, is about the cleaning services, and I know DPW does, the trash pickups where they have their retainers or those trash cans, but they also have a limited contract with Father Bill's Mainspring. I forget the name of the organization, the guys who come around. What is
Work
it, Chris?
Express.
It's a Work
Work
Express.
Express, thank you. Also on a limited basis on a smaller street, mostly Main Street and Legion Parkway. They do come by and pick up trash on a limited basis. We should take a look at their contract as well. And that's one of the things I'm gonna talk with Larry
Right.
at the DPW, just what their contract is and what their service area is.
Yeah, a lot of bids will have programs like work training programs that they might participate and partner with other organizations to provide some of this kind of maintenance work. One community worked with a group of people in recovery. It was a very good program that they partnered with, and they were able to find additional funding to support and work that into your program. So as you think about the supplemental programs and services you want to have and the assets you have in your community, you'll want to look to how you can partner up with some of those things to help leverage your dollars to go further.
One of the things I think what we should do in the Google Doc folder is put a parking lot folder that says all these items in terms of the garden club and, Work Express, and populate that, because we don't want to forget about it, because I will. But if we put the parking lot, everybody has access to just putting that information. I think that will be helpful as we formulate the agenda as we move forward along the way. So if we are good with the boundaries and the discussions, and it looks like it's a unanimous vote, Rob, for the boundaries. And so I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about can everybody see that? Hopefully not. Let me see. Oops. Can everybody see that? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you. So the part that's really going to be the next important aspect is really the engagement. John Marion sent me a text this morning. The engagement was, he reached out to Phil Cohen. He reached out to Marvelous Cuts. He has been continually, he has that ability where he knows this downtown, and he knows the folks that have been here. And that engagement is so critical to what we're doing. The challenge is it's prom season, and there's lots of things that are going on for John as a business, as with all of us. So the timing of trying to get the outreach. So he's, as he mentioned before coming on, before we all came on, was that, he's going to keep doing what he's doing, but he needs to do a handoff, which means some follow-up. So many of you, not all, had participated in last August, the Downtown Brockton Association. Just as I was transitioning into the interim position, my challenge was, well, who am I to say what should be happening? And so we held a forum. It was an all-day forum. It was from morning. It was a morning session, a lunchtime session, and a nighttime session, and basically was a SWOT analysis, a very informal, very, nothing high technology or with great quantitative, but it was a lot of anecdotal that we probably all kind of could talk about. So it was held in August, I want to say 18th, and we had probably in total over 100 people that participated. It was pretty awesome. And, we kind of served as the convener, but, I'm just going to run through. I mean, the idea is that there's been some work that has been done either by the chamber or by the city or by the planning office or the redevelopment authority, right? There's been the urban plan, the urban renewal plan that's been holding some open sessions. The BRA has a citizen advisory group. Councilor Thompson is having a cleanup, right? So all of those are ways of engaging not only the businesses, not only the property owners, but employees of those businesses, as well as visitors, and just people who just love to see downtown Brockton be successful. So I'm just going to run quickly through these, and I don't know if I uploaded this to the Google Doc, but I will make sure that it will. And we'll do that. John created a folder that just said outreach and engagement. But again, these were strengths in terms of proximity to the train and the workforce. Young residents are moving. Prova, Black-owned Brockton's engagement, Massasoit Community College Downtown Center, which I just visited yesterday, which is unstinking believable. It's just beautiful. You know, there's Massasoit campus, which is within, you know, what, 2 miles up the street, maybe. But great diverse students right in our backyard. Again, I will put these up in the Google Doc, but it's all the things that we all know, right? The beautification of homes, it's all nearby. So then we talked about some of the weaknesses, you know, crime rate and perception, homeless population, directional signs, a whole host of things, you know, little green space, maps for restaurants, which, by the way, the DBA now has a map on its website that identifies the restaurants in downtown that's interactive. So it was an important meeting, and what's happened since then is really kind of taking these and sharing it with many folks, including the mayor, the city councilors, businesses, but it's also, you know, again, you know, knowing that someone has taken the time to attend an event, they just don't want to see that just sit there. They want to see what's the next steps. And so there's opportunities about where, you know, where we should be going. And, you know, this might be a good place for us to take a look at, you know, in terms of bike repair, you know, a bookstore, wider sidewalks, two-way traffic. I think Rob May might have put that two-way traffic in there. I'm not sure. You know, and then in terms of threats, that these again are identifiable: lack of communication and collaboration, lack of entertainment for youth, apathy, you know, and many people said the same thing. So without having it be totally calculated, but it really was a, you know, I haven't heard from anybody from about the city council, but I think in general government was seen as being a deterrent. So, you know, these again, I'll make sure that I get these up into the SharePoint. It was a start. Again, you know, it's going to be August pretty soon. It's going to be a whole year. But the idea is that we really start to engage all the aspects, and we're calling it in 3 buckets: the property owners themselves, the business owners who may not necessarily be property owners, and then we have the residents / visitors that are coming, and really try to address what the needs are. That was a big first step. Some things have been addressed since then, including a very active DBA meeting where all the folks that attended that meeting in August do get invited to the DBA meetings. And at this point, the DBA is not charging anything for any membership because, you know, my thought is before we do that, we want to give them something that they know what their fee is going to be. And it's pretty de minimis. I think the fee structure has been like only $50 a year for, you know, an individual. So, but that's an engagement piece. The DBA meetings are held monthly. And that's another way. We've started off with our first meeting in January with 44 people. Second meeting had 37, and this last meeting had 39 folks. And it's held during the middle of the day, right? Some of the issues of engaging folks is when and how. And so holding a meeting in the morning, it looks like, you know, particularly for the business community, let's get this meeting early so then we can all go on to our next meeting. For the residents, it's at nighttime. And for employees, it could be a little bit of nighttime, but really having it done during the day and providing at least some sort of food to bring people, because if they're going to skip their lunch to attend something, then you really need to kind of find a way to feed them. So, you know, earlier on, John and I, we were talking a little bit about if there was one thing that's needed from my short term as an interim, and then John's 30 years as a DBA president. It's a full-time job just to be running these meetings and doing the subsequent work. So, you know, somehow along the way, you know, having a downtown manager would be a great way, because there was a gentleman years and years ago, 20 years ago at least, his name was Ed Nichols, and he did everything on a typewriter, but he went door to door, to door to door, to door to door, to door to door. And even though he was like only 10, maybe 15 hours a week, he had a pulse about what's going on. And if someone was going to ask me who's the most engaged person in the downtown, I would say it is Tommy Williams, who is the parking authority, and he knows everything that's going on in downtown. He truly does. It's true. Am I right, Johnny?
Yeah,
And- and-
we get a lot of information from Tommy, sure.
I do. And, you know, some of it's anecdotal and some of it is factual. But again, identify when we're talking about engagement, it would be important to kind of bring someone like him in. So one of the things that we, Ann, Rob, John, and I chatted yesterday just to help formulate. So this group, what we want to be able to do is every week have a good agenda, have it very streamlined, but, you know, not take on the world, but yet kind of really take some deliverables and some action items away. One of the things we talked about to get that engagement is to do a walking tour with this group around the downtown, look at those, like literally go into those borders and have a discussion. And while you can do it individually, I think there's a lot of value to having us do it as a group to kind of banter the exact conversation that's happening this morning. And that engagement, that conversation is important. So then when we are the ambassadors, or we're going to hold a forum, and Ann's going to talk a little bit more about some of the takeaways, whether it's a focus group or a forum, then we are all on the same page as to where we're moving forward. So that's my discussion about things that we are happening. I know Rob and John and Robert, there are things that you have done to reach out to the downtown community. And we should add those into the Google Doc. Questions, comments?
I think the deliverable thing is a good idea because that moves the ball. I will tell you that just by walking door to door, one of the main concerns is and we talked about this a little last week, so we don't want to put one in front of the other, but what's going to be, what are we getting for what we put in, what's going to be the product? So I won't put a dollar amount or anything, but that's the biggest concern.
Joe?
Yeah, I think that it's a fabulous idea. We need to do it for sure. My question is maybe further down the road, at what point should we get a list of all the properties by, you know, in assessed value order? So we know the target list of people we have to speak to and owners that we have to speak to.
So
Yeah.
that's exactly what John and Ann have been working on. So good question leading into that. Ann, do you want to take this?
Well, no, John has done a great job of putting together a list from the that will be our official communication list from the assessor's office that has not only, you know, each of the block and parcel numbers, ownership information, value, both land and property owner, and classification of use. And that's going to be very useful to you as you break into a subset of people from the steering committee thinking about what this fee structure might look like. So, and then also assigning, when we get to the signature campaign, who owns what, who knows who, you know, and how you're going to divvy up that responsibility. So yeah, that work is underway. And as we continue to refine the boundaries, we'll build that database.
John, just for transparency's sake, and I know it's still raw, do you want to share your screen about what it looks like, there's again, a smaller group that's been working on it, Joe, so, but timely to ask that because I think it's,
John, I've got it up
okay, there we go, Rob.
if that'll save time. So this is we start out with a summary page that John has put together, and there's a whole bunch of formulas behind this, but it gives us a quick dashboard as to the total assessed value. We then track the number of people who have signed on what's the assessed value of those who have signed on to the petition? What's that percentage of people who have signed on? And our target is 51%. And likewise with the number of parcels, how many parcels have signed on, the percentage, and that. This then corresponds to the master data sheet that John has pulled together that lists all of this data as to, lot targets, the size of the property, its zoning, its assessed value, its land use, ownership, and notes at the end. And I think what he and I will do is start to put together a game plan as to where are the bigger parcels. How do we get to 60 How do we get to 51?
You know, it's interesting when we were looking at this, there's one property, the courthouse, that probably has 20 parcels within it. You know, so really evaluating, you know, those properties that really have that are comprised of a number of different parcels is, you know, as part of this jigsaw puzzle we're putting together.
Chris?
Yeah, that triggered a whole nother question about the courthouse and cleaning up the ownership into one parcel. Why have 20 parcels? I recognize that was you know, the case before the courthouse was acquired all those properties of the state did and then built the building, but it'd be nice to clean that up. I was wondering if you could hit the form, the cell on the assessed value, because that'll show you the biggest folks that we need to address first. You had it up there earlier. So it rank order them by the amount.
Yeah, typically the reaching the threshold for assessed value is not as onerous as just the sheer numbers. So, you know, that 60% of real property owners that represent 51% assessed value it's a mix. You need to have the people who own multiple properties, multiple property parcels, as well as the assessed value. So
I hear you. I do think though, getting the folks that will likely be paying the most, if they say yes, then the others may feel like it's a bargain because they're paying far less. I don't know, but it'd also be interesting to see how many, you know, who those are in downtown. Does that allow you to rank order it through the?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and the other thing is understanding that lets you take a look at, helps you with determining what that fee structure looks like, because there may be outliers that you may need to, in your fee structure, take into consideration. And
yeah, like the post office you mentioned, right? Which I thought was an excellent point.
Yeah, though they come in through a sort of a contract, but I'm talking about, let's say you have a somebody who owns multiple properties. So in your fee structure, you may say over a certain amount that structure slides back attached to it, so that you're taking giving them some relief if they're super big or they have an outlier kind of size property that really isn't, you know, you want to try to come up with a fee structure that's considered fair and equitable that allows everyone to comfortably work with it. So that's one of those things of really understanding who's here, how much the value is, you know, what the ownership looks like as you start to think about this fee structure. And that will come as we determine what we want to do.
I think that's very helpful. And with those types of kind of guiding principles, we could probably go through this list. Just as you're speaking, I'm thinking Jeffrey Anatole, he has 3 properties in this district. He may not rank number 1 or in the top 10 because he's got 3 separate parcels, but if you add them together, you're right, he's probably looking at a much bigger contribution.
So I think it's really just sort of really understanding who you have here, and that's what, you know, I would suggest that probably at some point there would be, it's good for everybody to understand that generally, but also you may want to have a subset kind of start to think about and I can show you all the different fee structures that exist. They're all different, and how the thought process of how you get to that, whatever that fee structure might be, that is then suggested back to this larger group.
I see. Great. Thank you.
Joe Casey?
All right, one more question, and this might be for down the road also. Have we thought about what our response would be to the commercial property owners that, you know, with the classification, we only represent 10%, but pay 20% of the taxes in the city, and already think they're probably not getting the services for their money. And now we're going to ask them to join a bid and pay some more money for services that they would think the city should be providing. Sorry.
Joe and I didn't talk, by the way. This is exactly what I asked last week, Joe.
Okay.
Well, I think that, you know, that's always a part of the discussion in forming any bid, and it's what you really do, what part of this, and it's not something that you necessarily lead with, but we will be working with the city to identify what the baseline services are within this district, and it's really there are sometimes people want or think that the city should be doing all of this stuff that they've never done and probably never will do. So it's really good to understand what it is that the city can reasonably say, this is what we're providing and this is what your tax dollars should get you and are getting you. And then what the bid does is look at these supplemental services, or what are the additional things that that property owners and tenants within this downtown want. And those are the things, those are those additional amenities that are over and above what the city does provide or can provide or ever will provide. So you may think that the city should do all the marketing for your downtown, but probably the city's never going to do that. So it's a good way to look at it.
A couple things on that, Chris. And so your question was not lost from last week, and now Joe bringing it back again. We purposely did not take it up today because I think that's a whole meeting onto itself, and we need to do some data mining. I think we talked about, let's find that benchmark about what services, and I nor anybody else, I think, had really had the time to do that. And we were asking Ann for some best practices to see how some of the other bids are doing. But so the question will remain, on the task of identifying, because it's going to come back up. You brought it up, and Joe, and I know that other property owners will be doing the same thing. So
as we develop the MOU with the city, one of the components of the MOU is to articulate what those baseline services are in writing. So, and I can share the MOUs of the other bids to show how they've done it.
I think that
it's kind of all over the place. Some people are very detailed, and some departments are not so detailed, but you really want to try to capture as best you can what those basic services are.
I think, Ann, if you can load those up into the Google Doc for everybody to review in advance of next week's meeting, or whenever we're going to be meeting next, I think that would be helpful in determining. And to Chris's, when we chatted last week, it really is looking to identify that baseline. So there's still some work to be done on that, and important. So Chris.
I was going to say, in between time, Mary held another meeting with the new police officer who's doing the downtown beats. And as nice as he was, he didn't have a clue. His answers were horrible. He didn't know when they were going to be police officers on bike, although we now know he rides a bike. He didn't know when they were going to be walking the beat downtown. He didn't even seem to have an interest, honestly, but he said he would get back to us. So my point is, if there's a bid in place, these answers have to be right out front, because what you're going to hear from downtown is, I want trash pickup, I want snow removal, sidewalk plows. I'd like to have security beats, whether it's police on bikes or walking. I want to know when they're going to be there. I like them to be there when my customers are there, not other hours. I like to have a sense of where they are.
Yeah.
And,
So-
Mike can probably speak to this. People are more connected, right? They want to know when the bus is coming. They want to know if the bus is out of commission. They want to know it on their phone. They don't want to have to wait next to a sign for 20 minutes to then figure out the bus isn't coming. It's the same thing with the police patrols. Are they here this weekend? Are they not? That kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, that is something that we will be working with the city to develop. It's not something that, I mean, in fairness to all the city departments, it's not something they necessarily have at the drop of their fingertips. So it's going to take a little time for them to really be able, within this district, to articulate what they are, what basic services that you should expect to receive from your tax dollars and incorporate that. So it's not something that, you call up, your police officer and say, hey, give me what you do down here, because they need to put that together and in a reasonable way, and we have to work with them to do that.
So I know John has his hand up, and the only thing I just really want, because I ran that meeting and knowing the police officer, in all fairness, it's not fair. He was to give an update. It was a little bit of late notice and a little bit spread thin. So I think now that he understands, it's the first meeting he attended, and that's why we'd like to have questions in advance of him so he can be prepared to answer them. They're spread thin, Chris. So I respect the question and, to the point that we were getting at. John?
So I'm glad that we're having just a preliminary discussion based on setting up the whole meeting for all of these discussions. What Joe brought up and Chris brought up is absolutely important. The baseline is the baseline service is the important message as we're formulating and with, I know I'm being a little redundant, but my point's going to be that the taxpayer, the commercial taxpayer is going to feel like it's all going to come on him. Kind of goes to Joe's point a little bit. We need to show that this is a partnership with all of us, and the money that's going to come in, whether it be from a nonprofit, which is not conventional, all right, is not the usual tax we're putting on you, Mr. Commercial Guy, who's been paying taxes and getting really nothing for it, okay? And that needs to be changed in the message as we're outreaching. No, we are going to give you something. Here's the difference. Here's your baseline, and everybody's participating. Everybody is participating. That message is paramount, because the commercial guy is going to be turned off right away. Already is with the conversations.
I think that's why having property owners, having businesses at this meeting is important, then that they're listened to, John. So thank you. There's a couple of questions that were still in the chat. I want to make sure that we address them as well. You know, should tax revenue, this is from Robert Jenkins, should tax revenue within the boundaries be a consideration in the bid fee calculation?
I think we answered that.
think
Joe's
so, too.
question went to that point, and
Okay.
John reaffirmed it. So,
Yep.
and just as Ann said, and we really need to take a look at other bids and look at best practices, but I think they answered that. I was wondering though, Rob, does it make sense to include the tax, just not the taxes that everyone pays individually within the district? Does it make sense, or are we just looking at the assessed value?
The law has us looking at the assessed value.
You know, Robert, I think that it's important to think about a bid as a vehicle. And the vehicle is set up, you know, for property owners to decide how to strategically identify the priority supplemental programs and services they want to purchase, and then provide a framework for them to purchase those supplemental services. So although people will use the word tax, I like to use this word, this is a vehicle that you've set up to purchase these services in a fair and equitable way. And to share that burden, everybody benefits from these services that are going to be made available within this district. And this is a way for you to do it. Because if you don't do it that way, and you want to do these things, let's use something as simple as flower plantings. You know, you're walking around town trying to raise the money to do it. Some are going to pay into it, some are not. Everybody's going to get the benefit of that. But this is a way for you to spread that burden over everyone. If you're doing street sweeping or sidewalk sweeping or snow removal, you're not going to jump over a building that's not participating, because you can't. A dead cat's going to lay in front of that building. It's going to, you know, you got to pick it up. Or a big pile of snow is laying there. If that's something you want to do, that property owner and tenants in that building are going to benefit from that, because you have to walk down the street and get to their building. So that's the reason why, if a bid is established, everybody participates, because it's just a fairness factor. You know, everyone derives benefit from these supplemental services. You know, if you're a customer, or if you're an employee, or you're somehow coming through this area, if you want it to look clean or safe and attractive and vibrant, you're all benefiting.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I would go back and push back on that argument all day long and feel very comfortable doing it.
I like that. I like that approach, because as opposed to a tax, which seems like money goes into a black hole and you get nothing, this is completely the opposite.
That's exactly right. You decide what supplemental services and programs you want. You figure out how you're going to pay for them and how you're going to leverage those dollars, because I look at those budgets and say, this is one line item in your budget. There are other ways that you can participate and leverage those dollars out. And many places do that with sponsorships, grants, you know, partnerships, other kinds of ways that you leverage the capacity that you have. And you are managing, you know, how those things are implemented directly. You have direct control over that. So this is your seat at the table. This is how you are making this work within your very discrete geographic area.
And that's to Cindy. I know that's what Rob, you and I are on the same page here. That's to Cindy's point in terms of everybody having voice. So speaking of voice, it is 8:51. We really try to hold these meetings till 9, because I know we're going to lose a whole bunch of people. But two things. I know that I'm always cognizant of looking at the question. So Linda, the question, will the fees be determined by the type of ownership? And I think we already addressed that, how that's going to work. But there's a couple new folks that have joined us. And I want to be able to give everybody a chance just to talk about we need to talk about, we were thinking about doing a tour, but we're also thinking about maybe going bi-weekly meetings. Does everybody want to still stay on a weekly meeting? Let me know. The only thing that I have is an upcoming vacation on the April 18th. So my plan is not to be hosting this, but but let's have a little bit of a conversation, maybe a show of hands, who would like to continue on with a weekly meeting? Show of hands. Okay. Who would like to see bi-weekly meetings? Okay. I think
Robert,
that-
raise your hand.
So let's move these to bi-weekly meetings. I'll resend the Zoom because it's how's this going on a weekly. And then I'll set up a time for a tour, which I think should be separate than the meeting itself, just because we'll try to put some spots where you're not going out alone. I think if we can get everybody kind of going together. Oops,
Mary,
yep.
I would be happy to host a couple of tours at different times of the day so that people can make it.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to. What
And I
worked
need to
really well,
walk. So.
what was working really well, and what I'm trying to do, Rob, in this case is that having it not just only be done by obviously you and the maps and all the information you have is important. Let's have this be where we get, just like we did for that forum, where we did it in 3 different segments of the day. And by the end of the day, we just go to Brockton Beer and have a couple beers. I think that's sort of where we'd aim to. But there's some hands up. I want to first go to Mike Lambert. I wasn't sure if that was a hands in support or if I had a question.
I don't know. I was just supporting the biweekly meeting.
Perfect.
But just to end on a positive note, BAT certainly intends on being a full participant of the bid. If not over and above, we're happy to provide shelters as needed, as well as being a financial participant to whatever extent the law allows.
Michael, thank you. I think that's exactly what we're looking for. John, is that a support, or are you still?
Support.
Okay, cool. We'll get off the support piece at this point. We're going to go to bi-weekly meetings. We'll set up a day or maybe a couple of days. I'll put a poll out there just to get when people can participate. You can go to all of them. You can go to some of them, but I think it's going to be really important that we get out there and walk the district. And how about any other question? I'd really like to hear from you, Rick. I mean, you're with the Boston bid. I mean, what you heard today, you're not running away from us. You're still here.
No, I think these are all those, the issues that, fortunately, we've been around for a bit. But those are a lot of the concerns that everybody should be talking about.
Yeah, good.
And certainly the interaction with the police department and those other human service providers relative to homelessness and substance abuse and all those things, because that's an ongoing consideration.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you again. I think between what Ann's expertise and you being involved with on the board for the Boston bid will also bring a wealth of information. Just a couple other housekeeping. Everybody will make sure just test out the Google Doc and your access. If you don't, email John and just CC me so I know that that's happening. Please take a look at the material in the Google Docs. There's a lot in there. The bid 101 is really helpful. Taking a look at the maps, taking a look at the roles and responsibilities. And then I will have these recordings be uploaded there. So in case you have a conversation with someone like John Marion did with Phil Cohen and say, hey, listen, share these are good conversations to know that all of those issues are being addressed. So the last thing will be, and not to spend time on this, is take a look at that leadership group and to see maybe perhaps we're missing somebody. So Michael raised, the marvelous cuts to me, and John did an outreach to include them, but they're unable to be here. Questions, comments? So to be determined, I will get the dates. I'll look first at everybody's schedule. Keep the Thursdays. We'll keep a Thursday morning at 8 a.m. So keep those dates available, and we'll get the schedule out to you. Last minute questions, Ann or Rob or anybody have wisdom? Awesome. This is
Good
great.
job, Mary.
Well,
Good job.
this is why it's important to get all of us having a voice. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you either in a week or 2 weeks.
Excellent. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.